And now, the Lowdown, with economist and political strategist Elson Low.
Good evening, and welcome to the Lowdown. Welcome to the Lowdown this Tuesday night. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Please share the link. You know the story. You know the drill, folks. You know the drill. Share the link. Let's get everyone in. Let's get the show started. Thanks for joining us. Let's get everyone in. It's going to be an entertaining show. You know, it always is entertaining. So share that link, folks. We've got a lot of interesting things to talk about tonight. It's going to be primarily a show around energy. So I'll try to show more energy, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, we're going to talk about energy from a couple of different angles tonight. There's a lot of articles related to energy, whether it's gas, whether it's gas to shore project, whether it's Amalia Falls. There's a wide range of articles that have come out in the recent past about energy. We're going to go over these things. Folks, this is the Lowdown, issues in the news. Issues in the news, the Lowdown, of course. You know, we have a Saturday show as well, where we go into issues in a bit more depth. We do a deep dive on issues. We're going to continue next Saturday what we were doing last Saturday, which is talking about Sue. Good old Sue gets Sue. Jack Dale says he's putting out Sue. We're gonna talk about that some more on Saturday. It's linked a little bit to what we're talking about tonight, but Saturday we'll go into a bit more depth. The Sue Gate rolls on. Tonight we're gonna talk about energy. We're gonna talk about high gas prices and the potential future for gas prices. We're gonna talk about the PNCR's proposal to bring gas prices down and to keep those prices down. We're also going to talk about the gas to shore project and the various implications with that. We're going to talk about Amalia Falls, which has come up again. Gift that keeps on giving, folks. Amalia Falls. So we're going to talk about that. And then there are a couple of other issues that have come up that we'll address as well. So we're going to talk quite a bit about energy tonight, folks. Quite a bit about energy tonight. Share the link. Share the link. Let's get everyone in. Let's give everyone a chance to hear what we're talking about tonight on the Lowdown. As always, start your night. In this case, a Tuesday night. Start your night on a high with Elson Low. Start your night on a high with Elson Low. Welcome to the Lowdown. Folks, share the link. Share the link. Let's get everyone in here tonight. Let's get everyone in. We're here for the Lowdown. It's going to be entertaining, as it always is. We've got a few interesting things in the news. And, of course, we got to keep these things at the back of your mind going forward, because these are some of the issues that we will continue to face as the country continues to try to make progress. So share the link, folks. Share the link. Let's get everyone in. Let's give everyone the chance to look at the show. It's going to be fun. It's going to be entertaining. It's going to be interesting. So we're going to start talking first off about gas. And when I say gas, I mean we're going to talk a bit about gasoline prices, because it's actually a very interesting time right now for gasoline prices, where you could see the price of gasoline go in various different directions. It's an interesting time. We're going to get into that in a minute. Share the link, folks. Share the link. Let's give everyone a chance to come on. Welcome to the Lowdown. Good having you here as always. Good having you here to listen to some interesting areas of focus. Some of the major events that have happened over the course of the last week. Not all, but some of the interesting ones. So we're gonna lean into that. Let's get the first slide up as we get things rolling, folks. This is gonna be where we open tonight's discussion around the gas price issue. So there's two scenarios that I kind of want Guyanese to be aware of. But first, let me say, this is something I've said before. We gotta always be looking at the oil price. So there you see that J.P. Morgan is estimating that gas could actually, this is gasoline for your car, soar by another 240%. They're estimating that gas could end up somewhere like $380 a barrel in a certain situation. In a certain situation. On the other hand, we're also hearing that there's a possibility that gas could fall down to $65 a barrel. So that's the other end of the curve. But I'll break that down for you in momentarily, folks. Break that down, give you a good sense of it. But really, and this is something that I think Guyanese you kind of have to get accustomed to. We're not yet accustomed to, which is that we have to become, each of us in our own way, someone who understands and keeps an eye on the oil market, the oil prices that are out there, because that is going to directly impact the future of the country in many different ways. We have now got to pay even closer attention. I know you drivers out there are paying pretty close attention because the prices are daily causing you distress. I know that that's something that's going on already. But we're going to have to pay even more attention because now, as an oil producer, this really will have a big impact on the national budget, a huge impact on the national budget. As a result of that, we really need to keep an eye on these things. Now, what does it mean for there to be such a big difference between $65 a barrel and I think it's $380 a barrel, which is a crazy number. It's a number I've never heard before, an unbelievable number, really. The difference between these two things, or at least what it is that is important to note, is that there are different political and economic scenarios that will have a big impact on the oil price. So oil is not affected by just one thing, but it is often affected by various different things. On the lower end, with the $65 a barrel, there's considerable fear that because of high inflation and because of efforts to stop that inflation, we're going to see a few recessions across the world. Countries' economies are going to contract, are going to pull back. People will probably lose their jobs. The world economy will slow down. And that will bring the price of oil down to about $65 a barrel. That's one scenario that many people are looking at. Of course, for Guyana, in terms of our revenue, that would not be great. That would have almost the revenue that we're getting. The oil price right now is between 110, 120, a little bit below that. It's about 110 or so. Of course, I've mentioned you guys should always try and keep an eye on that oil price. But that is it from a revenue perspective. That's great. There were moments when we were earning far less than this, and the estimate for the year's oil revenues was $74 a barrel on average. So we're far ahead of that average. That's great. What was that? About 50%, maybe a little bit less ahead of that average. So very, very substantial difference in the price that we're receiving for our oil. However, the flip side of that is that when the oil price is high, the price at the pump, price of gasoline at the pump, that is tremendously high. And so average everyday consumers really feel the burn, right at the pump, no pun intended. Whereas on the flip side, the country is making a whole lot of money. Now, when the oil price is down, country obviously is not making as much money. However, consumers have it a little better at the pump, lower prices. So that's kind of the trade-off. What's important for us to note, though, is that as Guyana is an oil producer that is going to be producing a huge number of barrels of oil per person. What that really means is that we've got to be cognizant of the fact that there's terrific opportunity for us when the oil price is high, given our small population and large amount of production. So generally, we'd prefer for the oil prices to be high. It's just that we need to take a few measures to mitigate the local situation, which are very much doable and which we'll get into a little later on. Measures, of course, the PVP has rubbished, but we believe that that's much to their detriment to rubbish that. So that's one thing. On the flip side of things, you have a possibility of a terrifically high oil price, which would be very problematic for a couple of reasons. Why are we hearing crazy numbers like $380 a barrel come out? Why are we hearing a number that's as unbelievable as $380 a barrel? That's the highest number I've ever heard regarding oil. What has essentially gone on is there's a lot of anxiety that Russia will stop supplying oil. There's real tension between Europe and Russia right now. And as a result of them potentially not supplying as much oil as they've supplied in the past, that could send a real shock to the market and send prices through the roof. So that's one scenario that we've got to keep in mind. Again, that would be really great for the country. Of course, we'll be making bank, good times, money is rolling in, it'd be terrific. But the downside of that, the downside, folks, is that you'd be paying way more at the pump, maybe triple at the pump. It's hard to say. But that would be unbelievably bad, and it would almost certainly cause a recession across the world and in Guyana in the non-oil economy. That'd be incredibly, incredibly bad, and I'm pretty sure that people would stop going onto the road. So as a result of that, you'd see less spending, people start to be fired, less jobs, those types of things. It'd be highly problematic, and it's something that we really want to avoid if at all possible. So that's the anxiety in terms of the high end of things. As you can see, there's a big gap between the lower end and the higher end of projections, a huge gap. And that's really, really unusual. It's unusual to see such a big gap between $65 being one projection by some companies and $380 being a projection by other companies. Goldman Sachs, this is where I used to work, they have given a projection of about $140 a barrel. But they are on the belief that Russia will continue to supply oil. That is unclear because of the increased tensions between the European Union and Russia. So we'll have to see how that pans out. But essentially, that's a real anxiety in the world. Now, let's suppose that the oil price does go up, maybe to 140. Maybe not all the way to 380, but maybe to 140. That would be a real increase in prices that would worry so many citizens. In some cases, it'd be a little bit less than a 40% increase in price, which is unbelievable, right? Can you imagine paying 40% more for gas than you've been paying now when the price is already quite elevated? That'd be unbelievable. But that is the projection coming out of Goldman Sachs. That's one of the projections that people are looking at over the course of the year. Should there be a relatively mild recession, should things remain relatively stable, and should tensions between Europe and Russia not escalate beyond the extreme level that they're at already. But if we see $140 a barrel, are we really going to allow Guyanese to pay that much more for gasoline? Is that going to be something that we allow? Folks, I take this opportunity to remind you that Guyana is an oil producer. Did you know that Guyana is an oil producer? So if we're seeing $140 a barrel oil, that would mean that we are benefiting tremendously from these higher oil prices, tremendously. Are we going to just have the government hoard all of those benefits and not make any efforts to lower the gas prices? Is that what we're going to do? We're going to have the government hoard all of that, make all of the positive benefits, and then the average citizen not really reap any of that. That doesn't make any sense to me. That seems to me to be wholly absurd. But that's what we're a bit worried about. The government has said, they've of course reduced the excise tax down from 50% gradually to 0%. That's something that I'm sure that any government would have done. But what they've also done is say that there's no further actions that can be taken to lower the oil price and to keep the oil price down. Now, if the oil price does go further up, we in the PNCR have said that what we think needs to be done, or what we would suggest, what we would promote, is that we compensate suppliers for that additional price increase over some determined level. Let's say it's $100 a barrel. If we see oil go to 140, we need to compensate suppliers for that difference rather than passing it on to consumers. That will allow consumers to pay a lower gas price rather than paying the ridiculously high price that they could be paying. Now, of course, as we're making more revenue from the higher price, we will therefore have much more finances, much more money available to bring the price down and keep prices stable locally. Remember, it's a small population, it's a large amount of oil production, and even though it's still relatively early in the stages of oil production, we're still producing a huge amount of oil, 340,000 barrels of oil easily this year, which is, much more, almost 50%, about around 50% more than Trinidad at its peak. So a very substantial increase, some very substantial amount more than was even produced in Trinidad in the boom days. A lot of oil. That means that there should be enough excess revenue to help us to keep those prices stable, to help to shield our economy from a really high oil price, $140 a barrel, prices that we have not seen in all of history. That would be what we'd be trying to stop the Guyanese economy from really suffering under. And as I'd indicated, that is likely to cause in the non-oil economy a recession because people will stop going out, people will stop hiring, people will stop spending. It will cause a real problem in the economy. The cost of food would go through the roof. If you can imagine that, the cost of transportation from the farm to the market would be through the roof. You can just imagine if your greens cost 40% more, or if your ground provision cost you so much more. That'd be really tough. That'd be absolutely tough. And in fact, the increase in oil prices has been one of the, according to Yahoo Finance anyway, has been the largest contributor to inflation internationally. That's been the main contributor to inflation, is the higher oil price. And of course, some of you may recall that during the pandemic, oil prices were even briefly negative. They went straight down. And now that they've come back, we've seen them basically double in just under a year. So if one of the components of production, you're bringing your goods from the farm to the market, that's going to cost you. If the price of that doubles, you can understand that the price of food related to that would have a big increase. And that is what we have seen. We've seen huge inflation numbers when it comes to food. 14.5% last year at the mid-year, 13.5%, I believe, this year at the mid-year. So very, very substantial increases in the price of food. And coming around the bend at the end of the year, it was about 7-8% inflation. We were already seeing, the government, of course, projected 4.1% inflation, which was pretty ridiculous as a number to come out of the government right from the start. And the war in Ukraine obviously has thrown all of these projections way out. The last highest inflation numbers we've seen out of the UK was 9.1%. Out of Europe was 8.6%. So you're seeing very high numbers in various countries. The US, over 8%. It's not one country. However, the one country that's being affected by these higher prices. However, what we would say is this: Guyana is the fastest growing country in the world. Folks, did you know that Guyana produces oil? Guyana is the fastest growing country in the world. So it's not a reasonable comparison to compare us to other countries that are nowhere near having as good a time, as much of a boom time in terms of production and growth as we are. This is a time of plenty, and we should not have citizens suffering during a time of plenty. As a result, if we see that oil prices really go through the roof, we really need to refocus on ensuring that we don't allow those prices to go beyond where they need to go. And as economists are worried that once oil hits 130, we'd be in a recession. There's an idea that there's an increasing probability that we'll get to a slowdown if we go higher and closer to 130. So that's a real concern. Now, of course, the PPP has said, no, this is not a good idea. They're not interested in that. But if the oil price goes up, I think they'll be in a very difficult position because they've already lowered the excise tax down to zero. So the only real solutions left are for them to follow what we are saying, which is to bring the price down by compensating suppliers. We're also saying that you could provide vouchers to various folks who transport goods from the farm to the market, as we just indicated, and folks who, like minibus drivers, those types of public transportation, especially for low-income folks, as we want to ensure that they who are, lower-income folks being the ones who are most vulnerable to an inflation shock, to an increase in prices. We want to insulate them from that. So minibuses and so on, you would see a lower fare. We've seen some minibuses recently increase their fare, despite the fact that they're not yet been authorized to do so by the government. But it's understandable given the high oil price, isn't it? It's quite understandable that people would want to raise their fares if the oil prices have gone up. And I don't know if you've taken a taxi lately, but these taxi guys are charging you some pretty ridiculous, pretty rough prices, right? So that's what we would do to insulate the country from the higher shock. It would bring down gasoline prices, transportation prices, but also a wide range of goods that we produce locally, food and so on, because the transportation cost would be so much less. So that's what we're going to be really pushing if we see oil prices go further up. And as it stands right now, we believe that more can be done to actually bring the price down a bit more rather than leaving it, at these elevated levels. And to that end, let's get the next slide up so you can see that. We've actually seen, this is the next slide. We've actually seen a mention of several mentions of this in the newspapers, various newspapers, and we believe that this is because there's I think a lot of positive sentiment. There's quite a lot of positive sentiment for this idea, and as a result, you're seeing newspapers carry it. But the government has kind of painted itself in a corner by saying not just that they don't like our idea, which is, to my mind, an idea that's pretty clear that everyone has to do, but that nothing more can be done. So they're not even open to the idea of the vouchers and so on to help to bring prices down. Not interested in that. As a result of not being interested in that, they've painted themselves in a corner, and the only way out will be to admit that we were correct all along, that they didn't have a good grasp of the situation, and that they've allowed the oil price to really get out of hand. Let's see how the rest of the summer goes. Let's see how the tensions with Russia and Ukraine work out, and let's keep our fingers crossed that we're going to see an easing of the oil price, at least to a reasonable level, so that on the one hand, Guyana is making a lot of money, but on the other hand, citizens are not crying when they go to the pump. Let's get the next slide up. We've talked a bit about oil. We'll switch gears slightly to talk about oil blocks. So I told you that we're going to just touch on good old Sue. Sue, who's being sued by Jack Deal. Jack Deal is put Sue out of the out of the place. Jack Deal put out Sue. So for those of you who are not particularly aware, Sue Zhirong, which is a Guyanese Chinese businessman, made several allegations against Vice President Jack Deal in the course of a Vice documentary. And one of those allegations was that he had paid previous large sums of money to Jack Deal regarding an oil company. Now, this, of course, is the last thing that you want to hear, because, a gold concession or a timber concession, while they are very substantial in their value, pale in comparison to an offshore oil block. So for Sue to be saying that he had already paid a bribe, which potentially could be for an oil block, is very disturbing. And that's why we've called for investigations. We've called for an investigation into what exactly has taken place. We've called for an investigation so that we can find out the truth, because these revelations are very, very, very disturbing. These oil blocks, I mean, if you have an oil block and you're able to find oil, you could easily be looking at tens of billions of dollars worth of national assets. Now, it is, I think you would agree, I think all citizens would agree that it is nowhere near acceptable. It is totally unacceptable for us to have tens of billions of US on the line, and then for us to be hearing, much amounts before this were much bigger. That is that's very disturbing, because it would seem that it's a possibility. It needs to be investigated whether Sue has already got himself an oil block. There's supposed to be an auction later on this year of the remaining oil blocks, as well as those areas that have been relinquished by oil companies. And for Sue to be saying, essentially, that he's already got his hands on an oil block is unbelievably disturbing. It would mean that auction is a sham, if true, and that the government has already assigned who wants to own these oil blocks. Can you imagine that? Guyanese, the question I have for you, even if you are a staunch PPP supporter, is this: where's your oil block? It could be that these oil blocks are already shared out. Any of them were shared out to you? Highly, highly, highly disturbing, Guyanese. Highly disturbing. We want to ensure that there's a fair process. We want to ensure there's a transparent process. We want to ensure that the country gets the best from the oil blocks. Of course, as a result of that, we in one of our press conferences spoke at length saying that we need to see proper procurement, well, not proper procurement, we need to see proper rules, we need to see proper structures in place in this auction process. When that comes in the form of good criteria, proper criteria as to who it is that can actually participate in this auction. When it comes to the due diligence that needs to be conducted to ensure that the people who are applying meet those minimum criteria. When it comes to the criteria upon which people will be selected for oil blocks, that needs to be clear as well. The structure of the auction, whether you're going to have multiple rounds, people submit multiple bids, that needs to also be clear so that everyone understands and there's no room for any funny business. And the last but not least, of course, we need to ensure that there's a period of national consultation so that every Guyanese is reasonably comfortable with these particular measures being put in place to combat the real scourge of corruption or alleged corruption in the country. So that's what we're saying, and we're saying that there shouldn't be an auction of these oil blocks until these things are answered and until there's an investigation into Sue's allegations against Vice President Jagdeo. In the meantime, he should step aside or be fired to facilitate that investigation. These are very serious allegations. It's the worst thing in the world for us to hear Sue open his mouth and say, oh, oil block, oil company, I have to pay a bigger amount for that before. That would be totally unacceptable. And it's not the only thing that Sue came out and alleged. Sue also spoke about a hydroelectric dam, which one can only imagine is the Amalia Hydro Project. Again, so concerning. So this is something that we've brought up, that we've tried to shed some light on because of the real and substantial implications for Guyana's future, whether we're going to get the best deal. There's been a lot of talk about deals. This would certainly, if there's bribery involved, ensure that we don't get the best deal for Guyanese. And that's the furthest thing from what we want to see. We want to see Guyanese get the best deal that is available through a transparent process, an accountable process. That's the way to go. Not this question of backdoor deals. And unfortunately, what has happened is that you've seen a bit of a cloud now come over the auction of the oil blocks because rightfully, I think a lot of people are concerned now. A lot of people are thinking to themselves, is it that I need to be involved in these shenanigans in order to get an oil block in Guyana? I think it's very reasonable for a lot of people to be concerned. That's how we do it in Guyana? You pay your money and you get a whole oil block worth 10 billion US. That's the way that we do it. Folks. This is the furthest thing from acceptable. There should be no question in anyone's mind as to whether you can pay a money and get an oil block. I say it like a Guyanese, pay a money and get an oil block. That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So that's the allegation. That needs to be investigated until we get clarity coming out of those investigations, impartial investigations. We shouldn't be auctioning any of these oil blocks. And it isn't the first time we've had controversy. Former President Ramatar, when he gave away 2 oil blocks just before the election in 2015, that was very controversial, prompted investigations, lawsuits, public outcry. We don't want to see anything like that again. We want to see a clear process. We don't want anyone to be put under pressure by the government regarding paying any monies. We need to cut that. We need to make sure that does not happen in Guyana. And Guyana's reputation in the oil and gas industry and internationally has taken a hit already from Sugate, and it will take even more of a hit if we don't properly investigate, if we don't put in the time and the energy to actually show the world that we care about our oil and gas resources. And I throw it to you, Guyanese, again, one more time for the ages. Where's your oil block? You got an oil block? Because if these revelations are true, some people getting in ahead of you. Some people can't even get a house lot, much less an oil block. So that's another thing. Let's bounce over to the next issue. Next slide. Okay, so now you've got the gas to shore project. You've got the Wales gas development there. Let's jump over to the next slide. And we've got quite a few things to discuss around this gas to shore project. So we've heard recently that the project is going to start by year end. So by year end, we're going to have activity and things get going. The gas to shore project, of course, excuse me, is due to bring gas from offshore Guyana. Exxon's taking care of the pipeline to shore to generate electricity at a power plant. Now, of course, we don't want to give the impression that we don't want natural gas electricity. We know that the country has great electricity needs, tremendous blackout problem, and that in the future the electricity needs will be even higher. So we're fully aware of these things. Well, what is unfortunate is that we had some estimates already as to what the project might cost and so on. All the way back in 2020, the coalition had those, but the PPP has put all of that aside and decided that they want to do their own thing. And in the course of doing their own thing, they've stalled on this project for more than 1 year. And it sounds like since the project is getting started at the end of the year, it sounds like we're gonna have to wait just under 3 years for this project to even get started, which means that it is unlikely that it will be finished before 2025, if you can imagine that. So just because of dilly-dallying and so on, we've seen the project delayed massively. There's an argument that the PAP has been delaying the project as well because they're trying to figure out how to get some of this money, siphon off some of this money, engage in some level of corruption. So that is very concerning as well. That's something that we need to ensure that there's proper safeguards in place to ensure that there isn't this kind of widespread corruption like Sue is alleging and so on. Not acceptable. And the gas shore project is one we, I think, are all really depending on to ensure that Guyana has the appropriate amount of electricity going forward, at least to supply homes, but also to facilitate industrial production, the creation of jobs, and so on and so forth. Without those jobs, we're going to be in a real pickle. We're already in a pickle with high cost of living and PP's unwillingness to address the high cost of living. But that would put us in even more of a pickle because now, as foreigners come in, apparently they like AC. Who knew? Foreigners like AC. Who knew? But what it means is that the cost of electricity, rather the amount of electricity that is required, has gone up so much and will continue to climb quite substantially. So you have to have new power sources. So gas energy is perfectly fine as a power source. But the other thing is that we're not hearing a proper price tag for this. Let's jump to the next slide, actually, viewers, and we'll go into that in a little bit of detail. Okay, so now you're getting tenders go out for a project manager for the gas shore project to oversee the setup of that project, the implementation, how that project really gets off of the ground. Now, that all sounds well and good. You're thinking that there's going to be progress, but here's the thing about this project and the overall government's approach to the natural gas industry in Guyana and natural gas issue. It seems that the government doesn't really have a plan, and it starts from the most basic level. Do you know that there's no proper feasibility study that's been done for the gas to shore and the pipeline that's going to bring that gas to shore? No proper feasibility study. There's an initial study to look at different locations where would be best to situate the gas to shore project, but that study did not indicate that the whale site was the best site. In fact, there are a couple of other sites that were indicated to be the best sites. So first of all, the study that came out, the government has decided that they're going to ignore that and do whatever it is that they want to do anyway. All right, that's a starting point. The next thing, however, is that the broader project has not had a feasibility study. So we don't have a sense of the costs, of the real range of the costs. So as a result of that, it moved from costing 400 or 500 million under the coalition. The numbers you're hearing like 1.3 billion, or and then even more, the actual construction of the electricity generation station itself. I mean, talk about really going up. That's double, almost triple the cost is what you're talking about. That's unbelievable. But that's what we've been hearing, is that these costs are heading up, and the government does not have, even now, even after all of this time, a final cost in mind as to what this project really is going to cost Guyanese. They still don't have a final number for us. How is it possible that they don't have a final number for us? How is that possible? Citizens, you can answer this for yourself. How is it possible that they don't have a final number as to what this thing is going to cost? We're hearing with the Amalia Falls project, oh, it's going to cost 700 million. Fine. We're hearing with the gas, sure, we don't know what it's going to cost. And I'm here asking myself, so you're saying that for one project you can come up with the exact cost, but for the other project you don't know what the cost is? What, this makes sense? How is this the case? How is this the case? You're saying that, oh, we're not going to know what the cost for this is until we tender for it and so on. Yet the gas shore project yet the Amalia project we heard was going to be 700 million from long. This is deeply concerning. This project is one, as I said, that we need to have succeed in this country. For it not to succeed, it will create monumental challenges for Guyanese. Monumental challenges for Guyanese. But anyway, so that's the situation that we're sadly facing with the gas shore project. But folks, I wish that was the end of it. But these things keep on rolling. So no feasibility study. We're hiring someone to manage a project that doesn't have a feasibility study. We have no idea if this project is actually a good project because we don't have a feasibility study. It's just a headache of titanic proportions. But at the same time, generally, we want to see gas, natural gas energy. We want to see cheap electricity. We're all in favor of that. But on a basic level, let me put it to you this way, viewers. Let me put it to you this way. If you were going to spend $1.3 billion on something, and this is one of the price tags that has been mentioned, wouldn't you want to know whether what you're going to spend this money on is feasible? Wouldn't you want a study to show that it makes sense to spend the money in this way and so on, that this cost is a reasonable cost within a reasonable range? If you're about to spend 1.3 billion US, wouldn't you want to know that? It seems that the government does not want to know that. Doesn't want to know that. Isn't interested in knowing that. And I'm asking myself, who wouldn't want to know that? For what reason? That's crazy. But that is the reality that we're confronted with. No feasibility study. And I'll tell you another thing that carries it even to the next level. Natural gas, we're going to have quite a bit produced on offshore Guyana. Do you know that there's no gas utilization master plan? No plan as to how we're going to use the gas? This is something that's been admitted by senior government functionaries publicly, that there's no plan. Trinidad has an elaborate plan. I think it's like 700 pages talking about how they're going to use their gas. And we don't have a plan? It's unbelievable. How is it we don't have a plan? But there's no plan. So when people express distress, confusion, anxiety about these projects, it's because there aren't studies in place, there aren't plans in place, and the things are going full steam ahead, and the costs are huge. Over $1 billion is being bandied about. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Let's get the next slide up as we go along tonight. Viewers, I told you this was going to be a show with a lot of energy, so let's get the next slide. Next slide up. Okay, so we've come back to Amalia Falls, the Amalia Falls Hydro Project. Amalia Falls Hydro Project. The gift that keeps on giving, the X that won't go away, toxicity manifest. This project, what more can be said about this particular project? What more? Viewers, sadly, there's so much more to be said. I did 2 shows on Amalia earlier in the Lowdown. Some of the earlier shows. And I thought to myself, we've said everything that could be said about Amalia Falls. And yet there's more that to be said. There's other things that have gone wrong since those first initial shows. Viewers, I said it with Amalia Falls because of the complexity of the project, because of the lack of modern studies around the project. There was a 0% probability that the project would run smoothly to construction, to finish. Folks, within a couple of weeks of saying that, we heard that the Chinese contractor who was in place to build Amalia Falls had pulled out. So that prediction was immediately correct. I said there was a 0% chance that this thing would run smoothly. Immediately you had a hiccup. All right. Now the government is looking to retender and to go forward with Amalia Falls, despite the fact that it has proven to be so contentious, and we've already had one contractor pull out. No, they want to go full speed ahead. But folks, you may have missed this in the course of the conversation tonight. Like I said, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of passion. It's interesting. Didn't a man named Sue say other amounts have been bigger, like the oil company and the hydroelectric dam? What other hydroelectric dam is there in Guyana? Oh, Amalia Falls. So that raises a whole lot of kettle of fish that needs to be investigated, because if what Sue is saying is correct, if these revelations are correct, it means that the real reason that we're pursuing Amalia Falls is not because it's a good hydroelectric power plant project, but because a certain person has taken a bribe, and that's why we're going forward with the project. That's why we've been doing this project so long. That's why so many people have been baffled by why we would do such a risky project. That would explain it. Folks, we need an investigation to find out the truth. We're going to do a whole show down the road talking about this issue and breaking it down for you. We need an investigation to find out the truth here, because it would be absolutely ridiculous if for this full 10 years, more than 10 years, we've been talking about Amalia. The real reason the entire project was going forward, was even fully contemplated, is because of bribes. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you mean to tell me that this person's been taking bribes for 10 years now? Oh my God. Oh my God. Yo. As the youths would say, ballin'. This needs to be investigated. We need to find out the truth. We need to know what is going on, because it is disturbing to hear someone say, oh, other bribes have been bigger than this bribe that we're doing now. Nonchalant, sometimes I bribe 10 million, sometimes I bribe 50 million. I mean, what in the world? That's really disturbing. So Amalia Falls Hydro is one of the ones that's concerning. And so government is again pushing forward. But I think that until there's an investigation on this, the government doesn't have any credibility on the issue. Because at the back of Guyanese minds will be this question, is it the case that a certain person was taking bribes this whole time to push Amalia Falls, despite the fact that it's located in the most rural part in Guyana, despite the fact that the site is not a site that is conducive to construction, there are not proper roads there. We weren't even successful in building the road the first time we attempted the project. It's a wet area. It can wash away the roads easily. It's a mountainous area. The list goes on. There are some estimates to say that the real cost of building the Amalia Falls hydro plant, rather than being 700 million, could be as high as 3 billion US. That's the risk if this thing goes sideways. I mean, goodness me, all this for a bribe, folks. We need an investigation to ensure that these revelations, we understand what is true, what is not true, and if there is bribery and corruption involved, those involved face the consequences for that. This is unbelievable. Folks, to help you to get some context around this, I want you to think for yourself about every time you've had blackout in this country in the last several years. Every time you've had blackout for the last decade, imagine all the times that you were sitting there miserable in the dark. You mean to tell me that there's a possibility that the reason that you had to sit in the dark without proper, stable, cheap electricity, without a proper electricity grid, is because a certain person has been taking bribes this whole time? Folks, we need an investigation. Every time you get blackout, I want you to think about the words Jagdeo and Amalia. We need an investigation so we know whether this is indeed what has been happening and been happening for 10 years. So you keep that at the back of your mind. Every time you get a blackout, you think Jagdeo, Amalia, investigation. Jagdeo, Amalia, investigation. We need to find out the truth. That is why the PNCR has called for an investigation. That's why we've called for the Vice President to step aside or be fired while an investigation is conducted, so that citizens can feel comfortable, can feel confident, can stop having that question hanging over this nation as to what is going on with this project. Not acceptable. In any country in the world, if you heard these types of allegations coming from someone so close to a senior public official, you'd have an investigation. Why isn't there an investigation? That's the other thing you should ask yourself. Why Isn't there an investigation? For what reason? Mr. Su is a tenant who lives next door to Jagdeo. It's not some random person on the road who just said, oh, well, I believe blah, 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 blah. This is an allegation coming from someone who's well known to the vice president. He's admitted as his friend. In the vice documentary, he said, Su is my friend. He gets all the support. We need to know what exactly that support is. This is why there needs to be an investigation, folks. This is why we need to see this matter dealt with properly. And, whenever you get blackout, you just remember Jagdeo Su Amalia investigation. You just keep circling these concepts around in your head and you try to understand for yourself what's going on in this country. So that's the Amalia Falls issue. Like I said, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I am really astonished that the government continues to push it. But, an investigation might reveal that the reason they keep pushing it is because of a bribe. We don't know. We need to find out. That is something we need to find out. So on we go with Amalia Falls. On we go. First of all, it has to be retendered. And what I want to close off this particular issue by saying is really fascinating. Is the president saying, oh, we need Amalia, we need electricity. Now, folks, there are other ways to get electricity than through a hydroelectric dam. Did you know that there are other ways to get electricity than through a hydroelectric dam? For what reason do we need to keep persisting with Amalia Falls Hydro? For what reason? What's the justification? There is no reason. We could just do solar and take a significant amount of the load off during the day with solar power. It's the cheapest form of electricity right now. It'll save the country billions. I believe that over a 20-year period, the Guyanese economy will benefit as much as maybe 20 billion Guyana dollars a year in efficiency with solar energy versus Amalia Falls. So it's right there. It'll be far cheaper to implement. What is going on? How can there be this endless dependence upon this extremely risky project, which even in its best case scenario isn't particularly great? And the worst case scenario, let me remind you, is that it could cost several billion. Even the electrical wire to connect Amalia from the hydroelectric dam down to the coast. There are some estimates that say that this thing could cost as much as 900 million US. Now, the whole project is estimated right now to cost $700 million, which means that there's a risk now of it more than doubling right off the bat in cost, more than doubling right off the bat. Who in their right mind would pursue a project like that? What government, rather, would pursue a project like that? It's so risky. And I'll put it to you, even if, let's say, you're a staunch PUP supporter. Let's give you the benefit. Let's say you're a staunch PUP supporter. You say, oh, this is a good project and so on. Given the risks, just from the perspective of self-interest as a political party and politicians and so on, do you want to be pushing projects that are higher in risk, where you could end up really facing a lot of difficulties? Or do you want to push projects which are easy to execute, like solar, which could be right on the coast, where it wouldn't be very hard for you to do the project? Everything would be nice and simple and easy. It wouldn't be a big deal. It seems to me that you wouldn't want to take unnecessary risks, as a political party. So even if you're a PUP supporter, I think you can understand that we might want to dial back the risks a bit. Focus on something simple like solar, something like wind, cheaper, lower risk, can be done on the coast. You don't have to worry about, the heavy rainfall in the interior washing away the road and the maintenance. You can maintain solar panels easily on the coast. You would think that would be the way you want to approach it. Of course, solar has its drawbacks like every other thing. When it's cloudy out, you won't be able to produce quite as much power. But the big advantage of solar is not just that you're producing power, but you're producing power much cheaper, 2 to 3 times cheaper than hydroelectric power. So quite cheap. Don't you think we want to explore lower risk options before we go to the higher risk option? Why, even if you're a staunch PUP supporter, ask yourself, why are these folks still pursuing this? Well, I'll tell you this. So long as they keep pursuing it, we'll keep talking about it. I thought that we had nothing more to say about Amalia. But there's apparently a whole other side of things that we're going to have to keep talking about. So we're gonna keep going. Let's get the next slide up as we roll on today. The show rolls on. So we of course had everyone is very familiar with the fact that we had some rioting and theft up at Monterey Post. This was after the some protests regarding the death of Quentin Bacchus and so on. All on the East Coast, we saw a lot of protests, and so of course, we don't want to see violence. We want to ensure that people's property is protected. We want to ensure that racial tensions don't flare up in our country because we have a long history of great racial tension. We have a long history of difficult and violent circumstances, starting all the way back in the pre and post independence period. So of course, we want to maintain a situation of nonviolence as much as possible. Nonviolence as much as possible. But what struck me as interesting is that over the course of the last week or so, as various commentators have come out to speak about this issue, one of the things that's been mentioned quite a bit is the question of having a large population or many people, especially young people, who are not necessarily working and who are available in the sense that if something does happen in their community, it can easily escalate and become a large scale event because there's a lot of people around and so on. Maybe they're home during the day, those types of things. And that I think is an issue that we need to think about quite a bit as a nation. Because as the oil and gas economy expands and as we see jobs come in that are typically high earning, a higher qualification type jobs, you have to ask yourself this. Do we have a society in which everyone is able to access these jobs, where people have skills, where people have degrees, where people have appropriate training? And if we don't have a society where people are able to access these types of jobs, does that mean we're going to have a large population that is unemployed and so on? And so that if ever there's any kind of unrest, whether it's unrest in Berbice or Essequibo or Demerara, wherever this unrest is, Linden, Region 9, wherever this unrest is, do we want to have a situation where there's a large number of people available to create a situation where unrest becomes much more impactful, becomes much more dangerous, much more worrisome? Or do we want to focus as a society on ensuring everyone has an opportunity, everyone that can be trained is trained and prepared and ready to take on a good job? That seems to me to be the direction that the society should go. Because irrespective of who is in office, irrespective of what the issue is, it is easy for an issue to boil over if there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily employed, just kind of hanging around in the area. Little things can become big things, and crimes of opportunity can also take place. We want to move away from a society like that. Of course, it is wrong for citizens to take advantage of other citizens, especially those that weren't directly involved in the particular issue. We want to protect everyone. We want to protect the property of everyone. But at the same time, we also want to ensure that we're moving the society together up and onward. Not just one group, not just the other group, but together upward and onward. That is something that is vital. Because if we don't do that, then we really open ourselves up to all sorts of social ills, whether it's crime, whether it's gangs, whether it's riots. There's a wide range of social ills that we can open ourselves up to if we don't make a real and staunch and strong effort to train people to ensure that everyone is able to participate in this economy. And that is something that I can tell you will be a major focus of the PNCR, training and education to ensure that everyone is able to get these opportunities. We believe that you should put people first. I'll say that again, people first. We've got a people-centered view. So when we say people first, you understand what we're talking about. We're talking about training programs. We're talking about student stipends for those training programs. We're talking about salary top-ups for those on the lower end of the income scale. We're talking about removing income tax for those at the lower end of the income scale. We're talking about higher wages for public servants, higher wages for teachers. We're talking about partnership with people who need the assistance to get training and so on, so that they can live their best lives, so that they can be the best versions of themselves. That's the future that we're painting. That's the direction that we want things to go. And those are the policies that you're going to see, and we're going to keep bringing these issues up going forward out of the PNCR. That's what it's all about, because we don't want a situation where there's a large population that feels that it is excluded from the opportunities of the economy. That is the furthest thing from acceptable, and I don't think that anyone, any citizen who has the country's best interest at heart would want to see that. We've got to really make a strong effort to get that done, and the PNCR will spearhead that effort. And that's something that we've been talking about quite a bit, and we'll continue to talk about. So that's coming off of that issue, really unfortunate and difficult time for the country. And we look for justice for the family of Quinton Bacchus is looking for justice, and we support them as well in their call for justice. Okay, let's get the next slide up as we come to wrap up this show tonight. So we finally have seen the Public Procurement Commissioners appointed. It was almost 3 months, I believe, delay before the president actually appointed these commissioners. I don't know why the PPP took it upon themselves to delay the appointment after the commissioners were put forward. Folks, I just want to gently remind you, the PPP has been in office for quite some time, and you haven't had a Public Procurement Commission. This is a constitutional commission that's supposed to look at the way the government spends to make sure that there isn't corruption, and to give people an avenue to complain if they feel that they've been passed over and some sort of corrupt deal has taken place. It is also supposed to look at the various tendering bodies, various bodies that do the government spending, and make sure that they have right systems in place to stop corruption. So when a government doesn't put them in place, that opens it up to the criticism that it is pro-corruption rather than anti-corruption. And so that has been really a concern. I'll take this opportunity to remind you that despite the Public Procurement Commission being a constitutional committee, before 2015, the PPP refused to put in place the committee. It's the coalition that had to go in there and put it in place. Why is it that the PPP seems to be uninterested in oversight of the procurement process, uninterested in preventing corruption? Could that be because they are interested in corruption? Yeah, so that's something that's very concerning. And really, there's an unfortunate battle going on regarding judicial appointments, constitutional appointments. We've seen the leader of the opposition give assent to 2 judicial appointments, Chief Justice and Chancellor. And we've seen him say that, listen, the ball's in your court. I have given my recommendation for you to appoint these people. It's just up to the president and the PPP to make that appointment now. Why haven't they made the appointment? Why? That's the question to ask. The question you got to keep asking yourself in Guyana, is the question why? For what reason have they decided not to make these appointments, given that the ball is in their court? For what reason did they delay appointing these public procurement commissioners for so long? For what reason? For what reason did they take so long to even put in place a public procurement commission? Put in place the commissioners themselves, to even pick the commissioners themselves. They had a whole 1.5 years, 2 years to do this. For what reason did they not constitute the commission before 2015? What was the reason for these things? That's what you have to keep asking yourself, because it is incredibly disturbing when you have, on the one hand, all sorts of allegations of corruption with Sugate, and on the other hand, these types of actions. That's why we're calling for investigations, because we want to find out what the truth is. Because these things are highly concerning and should vex any Guyanese citizen, should vex any Guyanese. We need to see investigations. We need civil society to join the call for investigations. In any country, this would be something that would be taken seriously by way of investigation. So ask yourself this question, and I guess that's where we'll close off for tonight. Why? Why isn't there an investigation? Why did it take so long to put the Public Procurement Commission in place? Why are we still pursuing Amalia Falls even after all of these headaches? Why didn't we have a actual for the gas to shore project, an actual feasibility study? Why didn't we have that in place? Why? These are the questions that you have to keep asking yourself. And I put it to you another way, Guyanese. I'll put it to you another way. And again, I'd even speak to you, staunch PPP supporter, staunch. A lot of these things are easy, simple things to do. You do them, you give the opposition very little to work with. You do them, you put yourself in a strong position. Why is the PPP doing all of this? Why are they creating all of these openings for the opposition to attack them? What's the reason? We need to find out what is going on in this country. We need investigations into Sugate and the other allegations that have come out of Sugate, so that we can better understand what is going on in this country. We need explanations. That's why we're calling for investigations, for the truth to come out. And once the truth comes out, I think that we as Guyanese will have a much better understanding of what's going on in our country. Folks, that's it for the Lowdown tonight. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for starting your Tuesday night on a high with Elson Low. We're always looking to have fun on the show, always looking to talk about interesting issues. On Saturday, we'll be back for the next hearing from 7 to 8 right here on the Coalition's Facebook pages. So keep an eye out, and we'll catch you then.
Thank you for watching our program. See you right back here, same place, same time. And remember, hold the line of battle, comrades. Our victory is sure.